Hey everyone, it's Parisha from The Artistic Scroll, and in today's Procreate tutorial, we're bringing to life a magical water lily flower. We'll be creating the soft, beautifully glowing petals, adding delicate sparkles that dance around the flower, and finishing it off by adding gentle water ripples that give the entire illustration a serene and peaceful fantasy vibe. To follow along, you'll need your iPad, Apple Pencil, and the Procreate app. And don't forget to download the free sketch file and color palette from the Artistic Archive. It's packed with everything you need to get started. So once you've got your sketch and palette ready, let's dive right in and create this glowing flower masterpiece. Welcome guys, so this is what this canvas will look like once you download it from the Artistic Archive. As you can see, we've got the sketch here already in layer 1, so let's go ahead and rename this as sketch. And we are going to change the blend mode of this layer to multiply and then reduce the opacity of this layer just enough that you can see the sketch slightly. And then for our color palette, you've also downloaded that from the Artistic Archive, so let's set that as default. This is the magical flower one, and we're going to move this color palette menu to the left then. So we're basically ready now to start painting in the petals. So for that, let's create a new layer and move it under the sketch layer. And as for our brush, we'll be starting off with the technical pen brush in inking. So we will select this first light peach color, and we'll be working in different layers of the petals. So let's start off with the ones that are the furthest behind, for example this petal here. So we're just going to create an outline. And then we can go ahead and fill that in. Okay, so that's first petal. Then we can also paint in this one. Okay, and we'll also paint in this particular petal as well. Not this one, because it's further behind, as you can see. So we're trying to draw all the ones that are right behind every single petal. So that'll be the base layer of the petals, and then we'll move on beyond that. Okay, so that's that, and then let's see, we've got this particular petal which is on the last layer too. And then we've got one more. Let's see which one we can go for. Probably this one, because that's the one that's in the back too. Alright, so we've got our first layer of petals, as you can see. Now we need to add in these little sections here. As you can see, these petals are folding onto themselves, so we're painting the back of the petals here. So let's go ahead and create a clipping mask to this petal layer, and then we're going to select this second peach color, and then because we've got it as a clipping mask, we can definitely go beyond the border, but it'll still restrict this petal end within this colored layer. So as you can see, we've got a nice edge of the petal now, the back of the petal I mean. Let's paint that in. We're going to do the same for all of these now. Alright, so we've got the clipping mask already. So now we're just going to duplicate this layer, and then we're going to change the blend mode of the top of the duplicated layers. So there are two over here. We're going to just change the blend mode of the top one to multiply, and then we're going to reduce the opacity down to around 30%. This is because we want it to be darker, but instead of having a different color on the palette, we've just gone ahead and made use of our blend mode, which is going to help in a way, because when we add in some more textures and effects, this darkness of the back of the petal is going to get amplified instead of being a solid color, which won't look that good. Alright, so once we've done this, let's go ahead and group all of our 3 layers together and rename this group as, let's say group as just 1, maybe? Yeah, because we're going to be painting in all of our petals in different layers. So let's create a new layer now, and then I'm just going to reduce the opacity of the base layer so that we can see the next one a bit more easily. So let's go back to our new layer that we created, and now we're going to be painting in the second layer. So let's start off with this particular petal. So just the petals which are 1 layer above the back layer. Alright, so we've got all of our colors on the same one, and I think I have used I've used a different shade. If you've done the same, I'm sorry. Let's change the color back to our first peach color. That was supposed to be the petal color. This is supposed to be the back one. If you've done the same, sorry about that. But hey, mistakes happen. It's alright. So all you really have to do now is just choose this first peach color if you haven't made the mistake that I did. And then you select this layer, click on alpha lock, and then just fill layer. And that's it. Everything's filled in. Quite handy, isn't it? Okay, so you can turn off alpha lock now, and then create a new clipping mask. We're going to repeat the same steps of adding the back of the petals. And for that, now let's select this second peach color and then proceed with adding in the backs, just like we did for layer 1. Okay, so we've got all of our colors in now. We're going to repeat the same step. We're going to duplicate this layer and then change the blend mode to multiply and reduce the opacity down to 30%. Once you've done all of these, let's group all of our layers together and then rename the group as 2. Alright, now we're going to create our third layer of petals. Let's select this first peach color now. We're going to be painting in the third ones now. So for that, we've got just about 3 in this side. So firstly, we'll start off with this bigger petal that we have. Now just remember, this layer is going to be on top of this one here, so we don't want to have it going way beyond this, so the edge just needs to be a bit cleaner in a way. Alright. Okay, and then we've also got this particular one here. Okay, and now again it's time to add on our back of the petals. So select the second peach color and create a new clipping mask and then paint in the petals, the back of the petal I mean. Okay, so now again we're going to duplicate this layer, change the blend mode of the top one to multiply and reduce the opacity to 30%. Let's group these layers together as well and then rename the group as 3. Okay, I'm going to reduce the opacity of this layer too, and then we're going to create a new layer and we'll be painting in our fourth layer of petals. So select the first peach color and then these 3 petals, we'll be painting them in on this layer. Okay, now it's time to add in our back of the petals, so create a new clipping mask and select the second peach color and then we're going to be painting in the backs. Okay, so this particular petal does not have a back of the petal visible as such. So we'll leave that alone. And there we go. Now again, duplicate this layer, change the blend mode of the top one to multiply and reduce the opacity to 30%. I'm going to now reduce the opacity of this one as well this layer. We're going to group all of our group 4's layers together and rename the group as 4. Let's create our fifth layer of petals. Yeah, fifth layer. So we created a new layer on top. We've only got one petal in this layer. This is the central one. So select the first peach color. Actually, because this is the back of the petal that is actually visible on this side, up until now we've seen the front of the petal more prominently than the back. So we're actually going to go back to our second peach color and have that as the main one. So let's paint in that. And fill that in. Okay, now we're going to create a new layer on top, turn that into a clipping mask, and with this peach color, the first peach color, let's paint in the top. So you can imagine that it's actually the inside of the petal that is now curving out. All right. Okay, and you know the drill now. We are going to be creating a clipping mask of this shadow layer, basically, because remember this is the back one, isn't it? So let's duplicate this layer and we're going to convert it into a clipping mask and then change the blend mode to multiply and reduce the opacity to 30%. There we go. So group all of these layers together, rename this group as 5, and then we're going to create one more layer for these final 2 petals. I'm going to reduce the opacity of this base layer, and then we're going to go and start painting. Let's select the second peach color and start painting in these petals too, because remember this one's going to show the back of the petal again more prominently. Okay, and now we're going to create a clipping mask and then paint the front of these petals with the first peach color. And then fill that in. Okay, and then we're going to just go ahead and duplicate this layer and then turn it into a clipping mask, the base layer I meant. Change the blend mode of that clipping mask to multiply and reduce the opacity to 30%. And there we go, we've painted all of our petals in now. So let's group this one together and rename the group as 6. So you've got all of our layers together now, that looks great. Let's go ahead and increase the opacities of all of our petals layers back to maximum. Alright, so let's have a look. Okay, so this is looking pretty nice. So the next thing that we're going to be painting in would be these stamens. So we'll be painting them in 2 layers. First of all, we paint these heads first and then their stalks. So this is going to be between layers 4 and 5, as you can see. So this is layer 5, that's layer 4. We want it above layer 4 but below layer 5. So let's create a layer above layer group 4, and we're going to select this darkest peach color, and then let's go ahead and paint in these stamen heads. They're just going to be little ellipses. Okay, so once these are all drawn in, we're now going to create a layer below the stalk, below the stamen heads, and we're going to be painting in the stalks with the same color. So right now my brush size is around 7%. You can either have the same or go a little bit thinner than that. If you can vary the pressure of your brush stroke with your Apple Pencil or whatever stylus you're using, then even a larger size would be okay. Alright, so these are all done. Next we'll be painting in these little white stalks. I don't know what you would call them really, but they're the ones that are adding all of the fantasy elements to our flower. So we're going to be painting those in. I'm just going to group our stamen layers together and then rename this group as stamen. Okay, so for these, let's say these will be the whitish kind of stalks. So let's create a new layer right on top, below our sketch layer, and we'll select this almost really pale peach color, and we'll paint in these. Well, I'm calling them white, but they're not really white, are they? A very light peach. So just the ones that have these 3 petal-like endings. We're just going to be painting these on this particular layer. And don't forget to draw the dots. And remember to trim the edges as well. We'll do the trimming afterwards as well, once we have more effects and you're able to see everything a bit more clearly. But right now, let's just paint these in. Just make sure that they are all connected to each other, all 3 petals. Okay, so these are all made, and then we're going to be painting in the peach ones. So you see all of these, the ones that are remaining, so they'll be painted this more saturated peach color. And for that, we're going to be painting in all of these on a new layer above. So let's go ahead and do that. Alright, so I think we've painted all of these in. Great. And then for our last step, we're going to go right to the bottom and create a new layer right above the background. And we'll be painting in our leaves with this purple color. So let's go ahead and paint them in. Alright, so our flat colors are all in. That looks great. So the next thing that we'll be adding on will be some shadows in all of our petals. So let's do that now. Okay, so let's go ahead and start off with that. And just so that we can see which layers we're going to be working on, I'm going to be reducing the opacities of the other layers. Just while we're at it, you can even just select the particular layer that you're working on, so it might be a bit easier. So should we do that instead and see? The only problem with select is that sometimes where it doesn't allow you to reach the edges completely. So it's better if we just try it this way and have a look. Alright, so now we are going to select the base layer that we've got and then create a new clipping mask above it. Okay, and then change the blend mode to multiply, and then let's go ahead and select the soft airbrush in airbrushing, and with the same peach color as the main petal itself, we'll be painting in the shadows. So you can expect that this particular petal, for example, is going to have a bit of a shadow around here from the back of the petal curving in, and then probably some on this side, on the other end. I think it might be better if we actually have our layers opacities up. Sorry about that, but we might just need some help in being able to see exactly where we're putting our shadows on. Yeah. Okay, so we can try the other method of just selecting our layer and see. I think that'll work better, isn't it? Because we'll be able to spot exactly the ones that are not in these grey lines. We'll be able to see which layer we're really working on. So let's go ahead and paint in our shadows. For example, it'll be caused by this particular petal and the one in front of it. Just like that. So we'll add in all of our shadows first, and then we're going to go ahead and apply any kind of Gaussian blur to it to blend it out a bit. And just that, then let's see which one. I think it's this particular petal as well. And this one here. Right, so once you've painted in this layer of shadows, we're now going to apply some Gaussian blur. So one thing that you can do now is just remove your selection, because you know which layer this is on. Apply some Gaussian blur. So we'll go for somewhere between 7 and 13%, something like that. So I would say just enough, so because your blurring might be to a different degree depending on how much you really place your shadows in. For my particular, the areas that I have applied the shadows in with this kind of a margin, I would say I'd apply somewhere around 10%. Yeah. 10%, 11% would be ideal, because we're going to paint another layer of shadows just close enough to the objects that are overlapping. So 11% is fine for me. So anywhere between 7 to 13% would be a good range. So now we're going to create one more clipping mask above this layer, change the blend mode to multiply, and now you'll see what I meant. We'd created a base of shadows. We're now just going to create an occlusion shadow just in this particular range where we've got overlapping petals. So we're not going to go overboard with this. Okay, I think this would be enough. So we're going to be blurring up this layer as well. And I would blur it to just about 7%. Because now you can see it's a distinct shadow, but there's also a soft gradient caused by our previous shadow layer. So just in some areas, I would go ahead and blend the shadow up slightly. For example, in this one, I want a more natural curve of the shadow. And you can do the same for any and all of them if you want. If you're happy with how it's turned out with just the Gaussian blur, that's great too. I think I might just add a bit over here. All right, looks great. So we're going to be repeating the same step for all of the other petals as well. So let's go ahead and do that. So for our second group, let's create a clipping mask. change the blend mode to multiply, and I'm going to select this base layer so that we know which petals we're working on. Go back to the new shadow layer that we've created, and let's repeat the same step of adding in our shadows. Yeah, I think this helps rather than reducing the opacity to see what's really overlapping, because it kind of helps us to figure out what objects are really visible here, because when the opacity is reduced we can't really see it very clearly, can we? Also, if we remove the selection before we go ahead with the Gaussian blur, there won't be any problems with the edges receiving this kind of color variation, so that should be fine. Alright, so I've added in all my shadows. I'm now going to apply a Gaussian blur again. This time we can go up to about 10%, I think. That would be fine. And then we're going to repeat the same step of adding in actually, I'm going to remove the selection before I did that, like I said before. Yeah, now I've blurred it, and then I'm going to create a new clipping mask, blend mode to multiply, and then we're going to paint in the second layer of shadows. In areas like these where you can see both of these are supposed to be in shadow, I would leave a little space between the shadow and the lighter end of the petal, just so that there is a bit more of a natural distinction between the two, rather than painting both in shadows and then you'll kind of need line art to be able to actually distinguish it, unless you have really good highlights on top of it. Okay, so that's done. Now let's go ahead and apply a Gaussian blur. Oh wait, I think I want to add in a little bit more. Is this in the same petal? No, it isn't, sorry. Okay, Gaussian blur. We'll go up to about 7% again. And then I'm just going to use the blend soft brush as the blending tool, and then lightly just blend in some of these shadows. What we basically want is to be able to see the light against the dark, and just enough that we're able to distinguish the light from the dark. Alright, so I think that looks nice. Okay, let's move on to the next one. The third layer, create a clipping mask above the base, change the blend mode to multiply, and then select the base layer so you know which petals we are working on. Go back to the new shadow layer that you've created and paint in the shadows. It's not this one, remember. Okay, so I think that will probably be all. We don't need more than that. Let's go ahead and apply a Gaussian blur after removing the selection. And again, I would go to somewhere around 11% for mine. And we're going to repeat the step of adding a second layer of shadows. New clipping mask, change the blend mode to multiply, and paint in the second layer. Here, for example, I would place the shadows right till the edge of our curving petal here, because you've got a lighter petal on this end, so yeah. Okay, let's blend it. I'm going to apply Gaussian blur again, 7%. And then go ahead and use your smudge tool to slightly smudge in some more color. I'm going to bring down some color here so that I can see the curved part of our fourth petal layer here a bit better. That's looking nice. Okay, let's go ahead and paint in shadows for our fourth layer. So change the blend mode to multiply and paint in your shadows. Alright, I think that should cover this. Let's apply a Gaussian blur. Again, and 11%. You're probably gonna have the same numbers at your end too. Like for me, it's 11 and 7. Might be a similar sort of number set for you too. So we've created a new layer again. Change the blend mode to multiply for our second layer of shadows. And we're painting those in. Okay, now apply Gaussian blur again. 7%. And I think it's looking nice. Okay, so that's done. Let's move on to the fifth one now. Create a new clipping mask, change the blend mode to multiply. And you could probably just use the same peach color, or you can even use the petal peach color if you want. For this, I'm just going to use the same that we've been using so far. It's not going to make much of a difference. Again, apply a Gaussian blur. This time I'd say, just because the petal area is quite small, I would go to somewhere around just 8% for this. And then create a new clipping mask. Change the blend mode to multiply. Paint in the second layer of shadows. And let's blur that up too. Go about 7%. Alright, so that's looking good. Let's move on to the last layer set. Create a new clipping mask above the base. Change the blend mode to multiply. And then paint in the shadows. This one too. Okay, and now we're going to apply Gaussian blur. Yeah, I'd go up to an 11% for this. And then create one more clipping mask. Change the blend mode to multiply. Paint in the last set of shadows here. Okay, and then go ahead and apply Gaussian blur again. Say about 7%, and this time I'm just going to blend it out a bit more. Alright, so that's looking pretty nice. We've added in all of our shadows here. So what we're going to be working on next would be adding shadows to the back petals as well. So let's go ahead and do that now. So let's go to our first group. And then as you can see, this is the section of our back of the petals. So we're going to be adding shadows on top of that. So right on the top, let's create a new clipping mask and then change the blend mode to multiply. Now the back is the second peach color, so let's just select that second peach color. And then all we're doing is just adding in a slight shadow at the edge. And then with the soft airbrush as your smudge tool, let's go ahead and paint it in. The only thing I would advise in this again is to make sure that you select this layer, the back petal layer, clipping mask layer, and then paint in your shadow, because otherwise it will go onto the entire petal otherwise. Because remember, we've painted on the back as a clipping mask on the main layer, so we don't want to be going on to the entire one, but just on the back. So just select the back petal layer, the clipping mask layer, and then work on the shadows layer. we'll only need one shadow layer in this one, unlike the main petal, because the main petal area was just quite a large area, wasn't it? So we needed more. Okay, so I think we've got all of the areas here for the first layer. Let's move on to the second one. So second group, go right to the top, create a new clipping mask, change the blend mode to multiply, and then select the base of the back layer. Tap on select, and then return to this new layer that you've created. And we're going to start painting in shadows and blending them. So remember guys, if this is going too fast for you, just slow down the speed of the video, or if it's going too slow for you, feel free to speed it up. Okay, so we're done with the second layer as well. Let's move on to the third one. So new clipping mask, change the blend mode to multiply, and then we're going to select the base layer, return to the new one that we've made. Okay, still got the soft airbrush, both as our brush and the smudge tool. It's always better to just follow the shape of the petal. For example, in this particular one, we want to show some volume, so we kind of want our shadows to be a bit along the shape as well, but not with a very sharp end up here in the peak. So subtle, but enough to show that there is a volume, just like that. Alright, then we're going to move on to the fourth one. So let's create a new clipping mask, change the blend mode to multiply, select the base layer, and then we're going to move on to the new layer that we've made. And again, as you can see, just by using different colors, as in the strength of the shadow, we are able to distinguish this back of the petal from the layer which is below that. So that's quite helpful. Of course, when we add in some highlights, it's going to be even more prominent. But this is already quite helpful. Alright, and then we're going to move on to the fifth one. So create a new clipping mask, change the blend mode to multiply, and then select the base layer, go back to the new layer that we'd made, and then select this peach, the paler peach color, because remember we'd used a different color for this one. And for this one, we're just going to place a central shadow. We don't need to add in anything on the edges. Just a slight one around here. And again, you can just gently blend out the peak. All right. Then we're going to move on to the sixth one. Create a new clipping mask, change the blend mode to multiply, then select the base layer, go back to the new layer, and let's paint in the shadow. Again, it's just going to be a slight one here from the center rather than at the edge. So you can definitely blend this out a whole lot more than you have the others. Alright, so we've got all of our shadows for all of our back petals as well. It's time to move on to adding some more depth and some light to our petals. So let's go ahead and do that then. Now for that, we're going to start again from the first one. We're going to be adding in some color. So remember, we've got two of these layers for the shadows. So we're going to create a new clipping mask above the second one that we'd created, the second shadow layer, right? Then we're going to change the blend mode of this layer to linear light, okay? And we are going to select the orange color this time for this. Now again, I want to know which layers, which petals we've got, so we're going to select the base layer and then return to this new layer that we created. I'm going to increase my brush size to around 13%, and then let's just paint actually more than that, 40, 45. We're just going to paint in a slight orangish color, just like this. As you can see, it gives a nice glow to the petal, doesn't it? So we just want something like this in the centers, just like that. And this is why we've created, as well as you can see, it's not going beyond. The back of the petal is completely different now. So yeah, that's why we had it on a separate normal clipping mask layer. So once you've got something like this, you can then go ahead and apply a Gaussian blur to this. I'd say we can go up to about 10%. And then we're going to reduce the opacity of this layer down to around 40% almost. Okay, so let's just go back and undo that blurring that we've done. And let's actually reduce the opacity first and see how much do we really need to blur it up. So reduce it around to 40%. And then we're going to apply a Gaussian blur to just around, I'd say, about 6% or so, between 4 and 7%, whatever works for you. So you've got a gentle orangish glow around here. Okay, let's move on to the next set. So group 2, we're going to create a new clipping mask, change the blend mode to linear light, And then we're going to go ahead and reduce the opacity already to 40%, as you can see. And then of course, because we need to know which petals we are working with, select the base petal layer and then paint in some of this orange color here in all of the petals. And then apply Gaussian blur again, about 7 to 10%, about 9% here for me. I'm just going to blend these slightly. Alright, looks nice. Let's move on to the third one now. So create a new clipping mask above the shadows, change the blend mode to linear light, reduce the opacity down to 40%, and let's paint in. We'll be painting them in once we know which layers. I keep forgetting this step. Select your base petal layer so you can see which ones you need to paint over. Just add in this color. And then apply Gaussian blur again. Gone up to about 10%. I think I've added too much color in this one. Yeah, about 10% for me, 9 to 10%. And I'm just going to slightly blend some color in because I think it's way too orange now. I want some of this peripheral peach color to be visible. Okay, good. Let's move on to the next one then. Group 4. Create a new clipping mask above the shadow layers. Change the blend mode to linear light. Reduce the opacity to 40%. And paint in some of this beautiful orange color. And then you can blur it up again, go down to 9%. It gets easier once you come up to this group 4 or 5 because you know which petals these are, they're very few in number. Alright, and then we're going to go ahead and select this fifth one, create a new clipping mask. Again, blend mode to linear light, 40% opacity. Blur it up again, 10%. Alright. And then for the remaining two, again, above the shadow, create a new layer, change the blend mode to linear light, and then reduce the opacity to 40% again. Then paint in this orange color. And apply Gaussian blur, 9 to 10%. Right, so that's looking pretty nice. We've got all of our linear light and it's starting to look a lot more orangey now, doesn't it? Exactly what we want. So once you've got all of these, we are now going to go ahead and start again with group 1. Now the linear light layer that we've done, we're going to duplicate this layer and then we're going to change the blend mode of the top one to add. Where is add? Here we go, add, okay? And then we're going to reduce the opacity of this slightly down to 35%. I think it's looking much yellowish now, doesn't it? So that's how you get a nice gradient from orange to yellow. We've used only blend modes here, as you can see, but we've achieved so much with just some blend mode colors, and that's it. Blend mode variations with the same color. That's what I meant to say. So let's go ahead and repeat the same step for all of our groups. In group 2, duplicate the orange layer to add, and then reduce the opacity down to 35%. Okay, we'll do the same for group 3. Duplicate the orange layer, change the blend mode to add, reduce the opacity down to 35%. Group 4, duplicate the orange layer, change the blend mode to add, reduce it down to 35%. And we're going to do the same for group 5 as well. Duplicate it, change the blend mode to add, and then we're going to reduce it down to 35%. Now only for group 5 and 6 we're going to repeat another step here basically. Let's go ahead and duplicate this again, because as you can see, without duplicating it, it's still not looking that prominent, it's looking a bit too dull. So we're going to duplicate it, but what we're also going to do is we're going to blend this entire layer, this color, into the entire petal. Okay? So you can increase your brush size and just blend it lightly so that it still looks a little lighter but not completely dark. Blend it into the entire petal. Okay, great. So once you've got something like this, we're happy. Next, go to group 6, duplicate your orange layer, and then change the blend mode to add, reduce the opacity to 35%, and then we're going to repeat the same step that we've done for the other one. Duplicate the add layer as well, and then we're going to just spread out the color into the entire petal. I think I've spread out way too much. Okay, yeah, I think that looks nice. Alright, so we've got all of this glowing thing going on now, so we're going to do something similar to our back of the petal layers as well. So let's go ahead and do that too. We'll start off with the first group, and then this is our normal layer, remember, the back of the petal layer. So this, we're going to add a new clipping mask on top of this one entirely, and then we're going to change the blend mode to linear light again. We'll be adding in some highlights to this. So again, because we want to know which layer we are on, which petals we're working with, let's go ahead and select those and return to your new layer with your soft brush, soft airbrush. Now to the opposite side of the shadows. We're going to be painting in these. It's a bit too bright, don't worry, we'll be reducing the opacity again. Alright, so that's that. Let's go ahead and blend these. So you'll see there's not much space really left for us to carefully blend in without avoiding the shadows. So it's alright even if your highlights are reaching the shadows, it's only going to add a bit of a nicer effect actually to this, so it's okay. Right, so let's go ahead and reduce the opacity down to 40%. And there you go. Okay, so we've got a nice highlight now. And again, we are going to, let's just repeat the same steps. We're going to do the same thing for all of them in one go so that it's all consistent for you. Right, create a new clipping mask on top. What's happened here? There you go. Alright, and then change the blend mode to linear light. Now that we know we're going to reduce the opacity down to 40%, let's already do that. select those petal layers, and then we're going to go back to the new one that we've created and start painting in our highlights there. Okay, so that's one. Here we've got two. We've got three. We've got one more here. And the last one. So these steps are way quicker, isn't it? Because there's not much space really. And there's only so much that you can really do about being particular as to where you can place in the highlights and shadows. But that's all right. Okay, so that looks nice. Let's move on to the next group, the third group. So create a new clipping mask, change the blend mode to linear light, reduce the opacity down to 40%, select your base petal layers and then go back to your new layer. And then we're going to be painting in the highlights to these back petals. And then blend them into. All right, looks great. Let's move on to group 4. Let's create a new clipping mask, change the blend mode to linear light, reduce the opacity down to 40%. We know which petals these are, they're going to be the ones right in the center. But we want to select them, remember, because they're going to go onto the other side of the petals. So let's select the base petal layer and then move on to the new layer that we've created. Blend away. Right, it's time to move on to group 5. Create a new clipping mask, change the blend mode to linear light, reduce the opacity down to 40%, and then select the front of the petal. Go back to the new layer. Alright, I think that looks nice. I've just slightly extended it onto the main petal too, as in the shadow part of the petal too. Let's move on to our final group. Create a new clipping mask, change the blend mode to linear light, and reduce the opacity to 40%. Select the base of the back petal layer, and then go back to the new layer you've created. Paint in your highlights. Then blend them in. Okay, so we've got all of these now, and they look great. Now we are going to go to our last section of adding in some more highlights to these. So to do that, we're now going back to our group 1 and we're going to duplicate this linear light layer that we created. Change the blend mode to add, just the same way we've done for the rest of the petals, remember. Okay, I'm going to increase the opacity of this add layer up to 80%. Okay, and what we're also going to do is we're going to extend it even further. Now, the only thing that we are going to do as well in this particular layer is that this highlight is not going to stay just within the back layer. We're going to paint in some of these highlights slightly onto the main petals too. Okay, we've got some on the back, that looks great, but let's add some, just a very slight sliver of that onto the back petal as well. And what's really going to help us in this step is to know what our background color is going to look like. So let's go ahead and change our background color. So select your background, and then we're going to select this really dark purple color that we have here, and voila, we've got a nice dark background here. Okay, so let's return to our add layer that we've created in group 1, and as you can see, it's much easier to navigate what areas we need to highlight here because we can see it a bit better. Oh, that's too bright. Okay, so once again, that's fine, but let's add on a slight outline here and then blend it in. So do you see what I mean? Because the background is light, you wouldn't be able to really tell much of a difference, but as soon as the background becomes a bit darker, you can tell immediately what works and what doesn't. So what else is bright enough? So we can even tell which petals we're working with because now these are really bright. So that's really, really helpful. So just be gentle with the blending here, and then we can go ahead and add in a slight highlight to the other edge. At this point, you can even go ahead and turn off your sketch layer, because then you'll really be able to distinguish whether you're able to see each petal from the other or not. Are you able to differentiate them or not? Because that's the whole purpose behind adding in the shadows and the highlights. Right. And if you have any trouble still in figuring out which petals you're working on, you can always go back and just select this petal layer and you'll know. Okay, so I think we've got all of these groups highlights already, haven't we? Yeah, so just make sure that they're not too bright, the highlights. They're nicely blended in as well. Okay, so let's repeat the same steps for all of these now. Alright, so let's work on the second group now. So we're going to open that and we're going to duplicate our linear light layer, and then we're going to change the blend mode to add, increase the opacity up to 80%, as you can see, and then again we're just going to go ahead and add some more highlights. As you can see, we've got a few over here that we can definitely work along with a bit better. Just around here, I want these edges to be a bit more lit up. And then, of course, like I mentioned, we'll just have very slight edge highlights for all of these. Okay, so the second layer is done. Let's move on to group 3. So we're going to duplicate our linear light layer, and then we're going to change the blend mode to add, increase the opacity to 80%, and let's work on this layer then. So this would be group 3. I would really like to know, guys, if you would want more tutorials like these on fantasy flowers, plants, you know, like trees and things like that too. So yeah, I'm just wondering what other themes you would like to want to draw a bit more, so something a bit more tailored to you. Definitely fantasy related, because that's my niche. I love drawing fantasy. But yeah, let me know if you like florals or anything botanical. We can work on that. Or if you prefer something else. Okay, so that's one. We've got one more here. Oops. I messed this up. There you go. Okay, so that is there. So for this particular petal, I would just make the distinction a bit more carefully, so we can reduce the size of the brush and literally try and push all this color inside towards the middle petal. That's going to help. I think I just want to blend this in a bit more because it looks like a very stark line, which I don't like. This looks softer, better. Alright, so I think we're done with these 3 on this layer. So let's move on to group 4. So once again, we're going to duplicate the linear light layer, change the blend mode to add, increase the opacity to 80%, and then we're going to get started by adding in the edge highlights. Whoops. Yes, we're on layer 67, aren't we? Might be wrong. Yes, we are. Okay. At this point, it might be helpful to just bring in your sketch so you can see where the petals are starting. Okay, and then I'm going to turn off the sketch because it's interfering. Okay, that's there. Let's see if I can make this a bit better. Yep. Happy with that. Let's move on to layer 5. Group 5, I mean. Okay, and we can then go ahead and duplicate this layer, change it to add, increase opacity to 80%, and then let's get started. This petal is pretty small, so there's not much to do. Right, that was quick. And then for the 6th one, again, we're going to duplicate the linear light layer, change the blend mode to add, increase the opacity to 80%, and let's add in our final highlights. Okay, so we've got all of our highlights here, guys. That looks really nice. I think we are done with adding most of the highlights and textures to, no, not textures, highlights and shadows to our petals. So let's go ahead and add in some of those light and shadows to our leaves as well. So let's do that now. Okay, so we will open up the leaves layer here. And then we're going to create a clipping mask to the leaves layer, change the blend mode to add, and then we're going to go ahead and select the soft air brush, which is already there, and with the red color this time, let's go ahead and, well, firstly we're going to switch back our sketch layer, scooch it on again, and then all we really need to do for this first step is to add in a bit of an arc, a semicircular arc. So I've got a brush size of around 19%, and I think that would work. So just around the edge, very lightly, paint in this little arc, and then leave some space between the edge. I think I might reduce my brush size to 15%. Yeah, that looks better. Leave some space between the edge and the highlight. Okay, something like that. For the bigger one, perhaps we can increase the brush size to around 17%. Yeah, I think that works. We can now go ahead and blend this with the soft airbrush again. We can increase the brush size. Now all we really want is a very soft highlight. We don't want it to be very dark, okay? So feel free to blend it out quite a lot. Okay, so I think that looks nice. Just a gentle highlight, as you can see. And I might even just remove a bit of the highlight from the very back. Yeah, I think that looks nice. Maybe broaden it up slightly. Okay, so that's done. Next we're going to be painting in some veins on top of our leaves. So let's create a new clipping mask and then change the blend mode to add. And then again with the same soft airbrush, but let's reduce the size of the brush to around 2% or so. Let's try 2% and see. Oh, the size of the brush, not the blending one. Yeah, I think that might work. So we've got a brush size of around, I think 3%. And all we need to do is to just paint in lines like that, which go almost all the way to the end. So those are going to be our veins. Now don't go overboard adding too many veins, really. You don't need that many. Just about that many, and I think we should be good with these. Yeah. So add them on for the others as well. And once you've added them, we're just going to use the soft airbrush to lightly blend them out. So just blend them enough so that they can be sort of straightish lines, but as you can see here, for example, I've removed it again from the edge. It's not completely gone to the edge. Just like that. It's very faint at the edge, as you can see. That's what we want. Alright, so you've got something like this, and I think that looks pretty nice. So next we're going to be adding in some shadows below this layer. So let's go ahead and create a layer right above our base. So new clipping mask right above the base. And then we're going to change the blend mode to multiply. And I have a feeling I haven't really selected red for that. This keeps happening for some reason. Sorry about that, guys. I am going to go back to this red color. We should have used red for these highlights, and I was wondering, it's looking a bit too light for some reason. So alpha lock again, fill layer, and it's going to look a bit better. Alpha lock, fill layer, yeah. It might be a very slight difference, but I don't like having a random color picked when that was not intended. Okay, we're going to return to our shadow layer, and then we're going to select the same purple color as the leaf itself, and we're going to paint in our shadows. So for the shadows, again, what we really need is to add in a base shadow right here around the center. We also want to add a slight shadow around the rim. That's too thick. Just around something like that. Okay, and then we can go ahead and blend this. And one thing that I'm also going to do is paint in an extra layer of shadow just beneath this overlapping leaf. Just a very mild one. It's too thick, but let's see what I can do. Just a slight overlapping shadow. Okay, and once you're done with that, we are also now going to just reduce our brush size again to around 4 or 5%, and then place in some gentle shadows. So you can have just around the veins. So just try and make sure you don't encroach upon the highlighted veins, the ones on the add layer, and you're actually painting away from them on the other side. And once you're done with that, just very lightly you can go ahead and blend them in. Remember, this is also going to blend in your main shadow that you've done, so don't overblend this shadow. What we really need to blend is just the end, which fades away, just like it did in the highlight in the central vein. In the highlight layer. So just wanted to blend very lightly in that. There you go. Okay, so that looks nice. So the next thing that we're going to be painting is just, enhancing the highlighted veins here. So let's go ahead and create a new clipping mask above our add layers. And then we're going to change the blend mode to add again for this. And then we have our highlight layers on this. So let's go ahead and click select on this, okay, and return to a new layer. We're going to go back to our red color and then just very lightly paint in some of this additional red color just towards the center. Okay, if it's too much in the periphery, don't touch it, because we just want the centers to be highlighted. And that's it. Alright, you can turn off your add layer. You can see that it's really enhancing the veins quite a bit. So we're happy with that. We don't really need to blend that out. I think it's fine. So next we're going to add in some shadows just caused by the petals on the leaves, and then we'll finish it off by adding some textures on top of that. So let's create a new clipping mask, and then we're going to change the blend mode to multiply, select the purple color of the leaf, and then we're just painting in some shadows of the petals. So right now my brush size is around 19%, and I think it's giving us a nice soft faded kind of look as well. We will be blending it out with Gaussian blur in a bit too. So before we do that, I think this is already giving us a nice soft shadowy look anyway. Okay, so that's there. Now let's go ahead and blur it up slightly. So we don't need to do much of that. Don't add a lot that it loses its form. I'd say just about between 2 and 4%. So I've gone with 3. I think that's gentle enough. Okay, so we're done adding all of these. So the next thing we're going to be doing is adding in some texture. So let's go ahead and do that then. We are going to go to, let's see, we can create a new clipping mask, and then let's go ahead and change the blend mode to multiply. Now for the texture, I want it to have a bit of a crumbly kind of a look, but there's a nice brush that we can use for that. So let's go to spray paints, and then we can use the flicks brush for that. That's a nice one to use for this. So right now I've got a brush size of around 2%. It's too small. You can definitely increase the brush size to around 11. No, that's too much. 7% or so, and that looks nice. We're going to reduce the opacity, guys, don't worry. So very gently just add in some of this, and then we're going to reduce the opacity down to around, let's say, 30% or so. Yeah, 32, 35, something like that. I might reduce it even more, in fact. Maybe around 25% for this. Okay, then we're going to create a new clipping mask on top, and then we're going to change the blend mode to add. And then because we're going to be painting in some of the highlights thing here as well. So for that, let's go ahead and select the red color again. And then very gently, just around the edge. We don't really need to add in a lot. Just around the edge. I think I might want a finer size than that, so yeah. Just like that, about a 4%. I think I'm a 4%, aren't I? Yes. So just very gently around the edge, you can paint in some of this highlight. Just like that. And then let's reduce the opacity down again. Let's have a look. It's a bit too bright. So once again, we can reduce it down to around 25%. If you want, I think it might look nice to have it extended a bit further in too. Just a bit. Okay, so that looks good. Let's see if it makes a difference at all if we move these below our shadows and everything. I think it'll actually look a bit more natural if we do. So let's move both of these add and shadow layers right below our entire layers that we've created so far. So right above the base basically. And I think that gives us a very gentle texture kind of a look. Great, so our leaves are created. I love this. So we're gonna go ahead and group our leaves layers together. And then rename this group as leaves. All right, let's work on the stamens then. So firstly, we'll work on the stamen heads. We're going to create a new clipping mask, change the blend mode to multiply, and then we're going to go back to the soft airbrush, select the same stamen color that was the darkest peach color that we had, and all we're really going to do is really reduce your brush size. This is going to be a quick one. We are just going to be painting in the lower edges of this, and don't worry if it looks a bit too dark, we will be reducing the opacity of this layer down to around 40% or so in a bit. Okay, so let's reduce the opacity down slightly. Let's say we can bring it up to about, not even 40. 40 would be way too less. I'd say you can bring it down to around 80%. But if you have painted very dark shadows, then you can definitely go ahead and paint, reduce the opacity quite a bit more. Okay, now we're going to add in some highlights to this. So create a clipping mask again. Change the blend mode to add, and we're adding some highlights. So just very gently, highlights will be opposite your shadows, of course. Right, now I'm going to reduce the opacity down to around 60%. And then we're going to just duplicate this. I think we can increase the opacity of the lower one to max. And I think that looks pretty nice, yeah. Good. Okay, so next we are going to be adding a little bit of texture to these as well. The stamen heads as well. So let's go ahead and create a new clipping mask, change the blend mode to multiply, and we'll return to our flicks brush in spray paints. And just very gently again, go ahead and add in this texture. And then you can just move this layer again below the shadow layer. Let's see. Yeah, I think that looks nice. So right above the base again, just the same way we did for the leaves. Alright, so we are done with the stamen heads. And I think that looks great. Let's just group these before we get confused. Don't really need to name them, that's fine. For the stalks, let's create a new clipping mask now. Change the blend mode to multiply. And we'll just add some quick shadows. Oh, not with the flex brush. We'll need to go back to our soft airbrush. And then just below the stamen heads, we're adding in some shadows. Really don't need to add in shadows anywhere else, to be honest. As you can see, some of these stamen heads are kind of overlapping 2 or 3 stalks, so they'll both be in shadows, that's fine. Alright, so for their highlights, what we're going to do is we're going to duplicate the base layer here. So let's duplicate that, and then we're going to move this lower layer and move it above, okay? And we're going to change the blend mode of this duplicated layer to add. I think that looks great. It's quite bright. So what we can do is just apply a little bit of a Gaussian blur. No, that won't hurt. I think there's quite a distinction here, isn't it? Oh, yeah. Okay, so we need to apply Gaussian blur to the add layer. I think I applied the blur to the normal layer. Sorry about that. Okay. So that's there. We apply it very slightly. Does it make a difference? It doesn't. So we can just leave that. Perhaps. I wonder if it makes a difference if we... It doesn't matter much. I don't think so. It's actually looking like a nice outline, doesn't it? Yeah. That works actually. You can just leave it like that. Or if you want, you can paint in some more. Let's do that, in fact. Let's paint in some more. Paint in some more highlight just over it, especially in the areas which are darker, which have a darker background. The ones that don't have a darker background, for example, this particular one, don't paint it, because you'll have trouble seeing them then. I think that looks so much nicer. Yeah. Alright, see, we're experimenting. That looks great. Okay, so we are done with that. That looks great. Let's group this too. And Stamens group is ready. Now our petals are looking a bit bland, so let's add a bit of texture to those as well. We'll go with a simple brush for that. We really don't need to go into a complex one at all. So we are going back to our group 1 layer now, and we will add in some textures. So for all of our textures, again, we are going to go right to the base again, create a new clipping mask, and then change the blend mode to add. Okay. And for the brush, we'll go to charcoals, select the 2B compressed brush. That's a nice one. And we are going to use the same light pink, light peach color that we have. I've got a brush size of around 16%. And then just very gently light flick like that, and you can apply this texture. Okay, what else was there? So this one? No. Is this brown? Okay, so that looks nice. We are now going to reduce the opacity of this layer to around 70%. This is pretty good. So I think if you want, you can definitely blend in some of these areas a bit more, but not too much. Alright, that's great. And then we go on to group 2. So create a new clipping mask above the base, change the blend mode to add, and then we can start adding our texture. So again, trick is to not go overboard, just add in one flick and I think that should work. Really do not need a lot of texture, mainly more towards the center, and that should kind of be sufficient. Just like that. Yeah. Then we're going to reduce the opacity of this layer down to around 60%. Looks good. Okay. Next, we'll go to group 3. Create a new clipping mask above the base. Change the blend mode to add. And let's add in the textures. So 3 of them, and we're done with that. This one we can just reduce it to around 80%, I think. And that looks nice. Okay, we can then move on to group 4. New clipping mask. Change the blend mode to add. Okay, and then reduce the opacity again to around 80%. Let's do the same for group 5. So we can reduce the opacity for this one to 80% already, because we don't really need much more than that. And we can do the same for group 6 as well. So new clipping mask, change the blend mode to add, reduce it down to 80%. Just a slight texture. There you go, so it's already looking so much nicer and texturized. I think it looks great. Okay, so for the next bit that we're going to be working on would be these peach stalks that we have made, and I've just noticed this is a bit not too good. Let me fix that before we go ahead with anything. Okay, so now that we know exactly where our petals are ending, let's trim all of these in. So we know that is for example, this particular peach stalk is a bit, needs to be shifted behind, so we do that, as does this. If yours are perfectly in line, that's amazing, well done. I didn't do that on my end, but yeah, now they're okay. Alright, so next we're going to be just working on our peach stalks here, so let's go ahead and duplicate this peach stalks layer. Alright, and the top one, we're going to change that to multiply. Alright, and then we are going to apply a Gaussian blur to this layer, just around, I'd say, 6%. The effect is very subtle, you will notice it a little later on. Okay, so now we are also going to go ahead and duplicate the peach layer again. Okay, so we duplicate that, and then we're going to duplicate once more. So we've got 4 of these. Alright, so next we are going to be changing. You've got the first one over here, which is already multiplied. The second one we are going to change to add. So it's nice and bright now, isn't it? Alright, then we are going to be changing the third one over here to color burn. It's added a nice color burn effect here. So as you can see, there is a lot of color variation going on here. That's looking good. But the real magic of this will come once we turn off the normal layer. And there you go. It's actually transitioning with the color of the petals and everything. As you can see, it's darker up there, a bit lighter, translucent. So it's adding to that fantasy magic kind of concept. So yeah, we definitely need to turn off the normal layer. You can even just like delete it if you want. I've kept it in here just in case. But definitely, so you can group all of these together and just name them as peach if you want, or anything else. Okay, so the next thing we're going to be working on would be the white stalks. So let's go ahead and change the blend mode of this layer to add. And you can see it's already glowing. Great. We are going to duplicate this layer now, okay? And then we're going to turn on alpha lock for one of these. So let's say we can maybe work on the lower one here. All right, so turn on alpha lock for that. And then we're going to select this orange color. Go back to your soft airbrush. Paint it all orange. All right, remove your alpha lock now, okay? And then we're going to apply a Gaussian blur. So it's going to glow very slightly. Okay, like that. I think it's looking nice already. Yeah, I'd say about 4% or so, 4 or 5%. 4% looks good. Let's reduce the opacity of this layer down to around 50%. And you can see here, it's got a soft orangish kind of a glow over there now. Exactly what we want. All right, so now we're going to be painting in some of the edges here, which we just want the 3 petals to look a little bit distinct from one another. So let's go back to our white layer and turn on the clipping mask. Change the blend mode to multiply, and with the same orange color, with the technical pen brush, just very lightly we're going to be painting in just something like this, you know? And then you can probably just blend it slightly too. Just so you have something distinct like that. Some of them you probably will not be able to tell the difference because they're a bit too bright, but the ones on the black background are definitely going to show through. Well, it's not black, is it? It's like dark purple. The ones on the petals are not going to really show through because it's a blend mode, remember. It only shows in effects by interacting with the layers below the object itself. So yeah, if the object is light enough already, it's not going to show it through, but if it's dark like the background, it will. So not much of a difference there, as you can see. Yeah. Okay, so once you're done with this, we are then going to be adding in some orange glow around these tips here as well. So let's go ahead and do that. We'll create a new layer above this layer, above the shadow layer here. Then we're going to change the blend mode to add. We're going to go back to our soft airbrush and then have your brush size around 25 to 27% or so. And then very gently just paint in a soft glow like this. Starting with the ones that are on the dark background. The ones that are on the petal, you have to be very gentle with them. Like, try and avoid adding much really, because we want the pattern to be a bit visible. It's not going to be visible if it's already interacting with the light one. So I would actually not put in too much. So I'm going to go ahead and just blend out some of that. I want this 3-petal design to be kind of visible, which is not going to be possible otherwise. But maybe just a bit over here. That would look nice there, because it is against a darker background. Yeah, pretty nice. Okay, so now we're going to apply a soft Gaussian blur to this again. Yeah, I'd say go about 8% or so. And then we're going to duplicate this glow layer. Okay, And then we will be applying a bit more of a glow now, a bit more of a Gaussian blur to the lower layer again. So I'd say you can go to somewhere around 14% or so, just so that you can see that there's a distinct line over here around the circle, which we don't want. So that line kind of disappears at around 14% for me. So at whatever point it disappears for you, go for that. Okay, and then we're going to slightly reduce the opacity of our top layer to around 75%. And there you go, it's a very gentle sort of a glow here, exactly what we wanted. That looks lovely. Okay, so at the moment, as you can see, the flower looks amazing, but we need a bit more depth to this. So the best way to add that is shadows. So let's quickly just make some shadows. Before that, we're going to group our white layers together, the white stock layers. I'm just going to rename that as white. Now create a new layer above your peach group. Okay. Change the blend mode to multiply and select the darkest peach color that we have there. And with the soft airbrush, again, we're going to be painting in some general shadows just around these areas. Yes, I know it doesn't look too nice right now, but hold on. It will in a bit. Okay, now we're going to apply some Gaussian blur to this. Just a very slight one. I'd say you can go up to about 8% or so. And then you can blend out some of these areas. To create more depth. And also try and keep the shadows more towards the center as you proceed into like this layer 4 section. And clear the top of the petal. So we're going to be erasing those in a second. I'll show you what I mean. But as you can see now, just by blending it together, we have made a big distinction between some of these areas. So I'm just going to slightly erase an area over here as we go. Just so that that is slightly lighter than the ones overlapping them. That's just going to help us give a nice distinction between the two, create a little zone of reflected light in a way. Just a tiny zone, we don't need too much. Okay, and then you can just have a look and see which of these areas might be the shadow might have encroached on the petal heads, which we do not want. So clear your petal heads of any shadows. That's going to add a bit more. It's going to help bring out your illustration quite a bit. Okay, so that's looking pretty nice. Now we are just going to go ahead and duplicate this layer. Ooh, that's dark, isn't it? Let's reduce the opacity down to around 40% and have a look. There is so much depth to this illustration now. Again, we can push back some color, spread it around a bit more. Let's see, but this is truly where everything's going to come alive. If you don't add in these shadows, it's not going to work. Let's see if we need to reduce it even further, or does it look better if it's dark? I think we can reduce it down to around 30%. For my particular illustration, it looks good at 30%. Have a look and play around with how much it looks good on yours. Between 30 to 40%, it should work. Okay, there's so much depth in this. I'm loving it. So we're almost done with everything, guys. So all that's left is to add in some ripples and a nice shimmer of our fantasy flower. So let's go ahead and add in some really quick ripple effects on the water here. So to do that, create a new layer above all. And we're going to change the blend mode to add. And for this, there's a very nice brush in Procreate already. It's basically present in elements and it's called oceans. So let's just select that. We are going to select the peach color that we have. I've got a brush size of around 31% and an opacity of 87. So all we really need to do with this is just gently in the areas that you're expecting your, well, you have your petals, paint in some ripples with this color. And then just to highlight the glow a little bit more, we can paint in some extra ripples around. Just like that. Okay, so we don't really need to add a lot in this. This looks nice as it is. We're going to duplicate this layer. Ooh, that's bright. Then we're going to reduce the opacity down to around 40%. I think that looks pretty good. Maybe we can also just change the color of the top one. So turn on alpha lock and we can have the orange color with the soft airbrush. And then this gives a very gentle peach, warm peach kind of effect. Exactly what we want. Okay, beautiful. And then for the last bit, we are going to be adding in some shimmer above our entire flower layer here. So let's go ahead and do that. So create a new layer, turn on the dipping, change the blend mode to add. And then we're going to go to luminance and select the glimmer brush. So I have already modified this, but you can do this with me if you haven't already in my previous tutorials. All we're doing is shifting to the left and turning on duplicate. So once you've gone on there, you've opened your brush studio, you've got the stroke path here. Just increase the spacing to maximum. That's it. There's nothing else you need to do. It's essentially the same brush. All right. And then we are just going to be painting in some nice, nice shimmers. So again, play with your brush size and see what works for you. We want just something very simple. Okay, And it will take a few tries for you to get the exact pattern you want, and if you can't get it in the first go, don't despair. I'm having trouble too. You can always add in some more, and then we can erase some. So use your soft airbrush as your eraser, and then you can start erasing just a little pattern. So you get something like a little, you know, a swirl kind of a pattern. That's what we want. And especially, I want to keep all of our shimmers within the range of this section. So I want to remove all of them, all of those that are coming beyond the petals here, as you can see, okay? So I'm going to remove all of those and just keep them. So that makes it look like they're all coming from within this section. So anything that is on the top of the petal heads as well, I'm going to remove those. Just on those, because I'm trying to make it follow a path here, as you can see. I think that's looking nice. Okay, so that looks pretty good. Let's see what else. Maybe I can erase a few in the centers. Okay, so I think that looks pretty nice. Yeah, that looks great. So for our last step, I just want to add in a bit more glow to this. So we're going to duplicate our shimmer layer. Ooh, that looking nice. We are then going to select our lower layer and apply a slight Gaussian blur to this. So just about, I'd say 2%. Yeah, 2% is enough. And that's it, guys. We have just created this beautiful flower, magical flower, as you can see. I think it looks just amazing. Thank you so much for joining me in this tutorial, and I hope you had fun creating this beautiful flower with me. So guys, if you'd like to share your creation with me online, remember to tag me in your post on Instagram. I absolutely love seeing your versions of the tutorials and sharing them on my page. And make sure to subscribe to my channel if you enjoyed this tutorial, and don't forget to check out my other videos. I've got so many more magical projects waiting for you. New tutorials come out weekly on my channel, so hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you never miss out. Thanks again for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Take care!